Hi everybody, my name is Numerico and I'm here with Teresa Numerico. We are both working at the University of Roma 3 and I will assist Teresa in her presentation. Teresa is Associate Professor of Philosophy of Science and Logics at the University of Roma 3 and I'm a researcher at the same university but different faculty, the Political Science faculty in Roma 3. And Teresa will speak about big data in social sciences and humanities, from epistemology to data power. And I will ask questions during your presentation. I will make sure that you respect the timeline. Okay?
Thanks. Yes, please do make do ask questions. Okay. Hi everybody, it's a pleasure to be here for the second time at Around the World Conference. This year our theme is very fascinating and I think that there is a lot to discuss about big data. My talk I will start from the title. Big data. Obviously, I will discuss about big data in social sciences and humanities, and this is easy to understand. The second part of the title is a bit more complicated. It's I want to discuss the issues related to big data experiments and results, with special regard to epistemology and to the question of the relationship between the production of results out of data-driven science and power. The politics of the big data, we could also say, but someone suggested that politics should not be related to science because it deals with politicians. But I do not agree completely with this statement, because in my view, science has a lot to do with politics and has a lot to do with power at the moment. So what I will discuss about, obviously, ethical and legal issues related to social science and humanities experiments using big data techniques, but I will also especially discuss about the theory of knowledge and the theory of creation of new knowledge that is used within the rhetoric of big data, and the relationship about this theory and the politics, the management of power that is allowed by this understanding of the data-driven science. In my talk, I will discuss about three major items. The first is an historical, let's say, a genealogical perspective on the approach to data management used at the beginning of communication technologies, and I will discuss particularly some issues, some of the ideas of some of the pioneers of communication technology, such as Norbert Wiener, Licklider, and Bob Taylor. Obviously, I could have discussed about many other pioneers, but I do not want to spend all my presentation discussing about history. The second part will deal with big data critical examples. In particular, I will discuss about Facebook experiment on emotional contagion, Google through trends, discussing output, and culturomics. And the third and last section will be a sort of conclusion that raises questions about epistemology, methodology, ethics of research, that altogether means, according to me, the politics of big data. So I don't want to lose other time. to waste other time discussing the outline, and I will start with the first part, a genealogical discussion of data management in communication technologies. Let's start from the very pioneer cybernetics, Norbert Wiener. This is a very famous statement. Information is more a matter of process than of storage. Wiener used this statement to stress the fact that it is not possible to store information, because information need to be used, need to be available, need to be transformed, need to be dynamic, and all of this activity that we need to do with information cannot be stored. So it is impossible to store information. Obviously, this was a key thing when in 1950, when he started we were at the beginning of the idea of cybernetics and on information management. But of course, the issues related to the possibility of storing the process of information in the process, information while it is transforming itself in the data environment. This is something that is exactly what's the gist of big data. Big data offers this perspective that as a promise. So big data promise us that we can store the process, we can store the dynamic of the data and the information that is related with the data. So big data is saying us that we are not there is no contradiction between processing information and storing information. Information can be stored while it is processed. Then we move to another pioneer, Licklider. And Licklider was a very key figure of the beginning of the development of the communication technologies, and he was he had a leading position because it was for 2 years between 72 and 74, the head of the IPTO, the office of the ARPA that deal with innovating information processing technologies. According to the Licklider, and in particular to a book discussing about the future of libraries, the future of libraries means also the future of making science, of the making a new start of dealing with scientific knowledge, in this future data are not only not only can it will be possible not only to store all the data that are that were at the moment within libraries, but also put this data together with the data coming from the research experiments, and the machines that could deal with this management, with this with mixing together all the data, will be responsible also to make sense of all this data. So these data were not only included in were not only stored in the mind of the researcher, but were also stored in the memory of the machines, and the machines would have the capability of making sense of all these data better than the human being's mind could do all alone. So this was it was in a special role because it was not only capable of predicting the future, but it was also in a position of making this future real, funding the right projects and organizing the future of science in this in order to fulfill this perspective. So the proposal that Licklider was making in 1965 was that it was possible to organize knowledge in a way that all the parts of knowledge could interact with one another, and in order to create a new capability of processing this data that were organized, that were possible because of the machine's algorithms. Then there is another interesting issues related to this idea of managing data raised by Bob Taylor. Bob Taylor was the engineer who was in charge of the creation of ARPANET, who managed the creation of ARPANET, and he was also a co-author of Licklider in his very famous seminal paper that in 1968 foresaw the computer as a communication device. Taylor was during the Vietnam War, worked for the intelligence service and was sent to Vietnam in order to make sense of the data coming from the Vietnam battlefield, because all these data were very contradictory with each other. So he realized that he had to analyze all this data in Vietnam in order to send to Washington people just one univocal report. And at the end of this, all this process, we were not sure whether these data were the truth or not, but it was sure that all these data were consistent, and Washington people were happy with this consistency. So this is another critical and interesting issues related to management of the data. The important thing is that we obtain a consistent result. We don't mind if the data were a mess. Now let's move to the second part. The second part is the part in which I will I'm discussing about some examples of big data experiments in social sciences and humanities. And in particular, I will discuss about, first of all, I will start discussing this very famous Facebook experiment that was published in 2014 in a very important social science journal, PNAS, in which this experiment consisted in in trying to understand, to make sense of the positive or negative emotional contagion. So they tried to measure if coming from the news feed, the positive words coming in a news feed could transform the post created by people in positive posts, and if the negative posts could obtain negative posts when received by people. The paper was written by Adam Kramer. There is a core data science member of the data science team in Facebook, and by two other scholars in social sciences that at that time worked at the Cornell department. Obviously, the experiment raised a lot of discussion because it was not clear if people involved in the experiment, Facebook users involved in the experiments, there were almost 700,000 people, were informed, could give the informed consent to participate to the experiment. In fact, there was no prior information, there was no opt-out opportunity, but everything was cleared by the fact that Facebook is a company and the data politics of Facebook is not the data politics of another educational institution. So it is not, there was no need for informed consent. And people that were in favor of this experiment defended Facebook, saying that there was no point in being surprised or being negatively moved by the experiment, because the experiment is another of the many manipulations of data that are used within Facebook. Facebook is using to manipulate the newsfeed in order to give a better experience to users of the social network environment. So this is not a special case. Research is not relevant in this case, because the manipulation of data is normal thing for within Facebook.
What do they mean for better user experience, in your opinion?
But they want to make sure that people do not leave the social network soon. So they want to present a positive or an interesting newsfeed, so that people
So they
are
will keep
engaged.
on,
Yes, they keep on. They are engaged, and they keep on spending time within the environment, letting the company to make money out of it. Now, so this is the discussion, the general discussion, but then there was this, let's say, ethical board that in US is need to approve all experiments. Institutional review board need to approve all experiments, all researches that has to do with the human beings. And according to the Cornell,
carried out within the university.
Yes, carried out
all
by the professors and researchers and PhD people that work within the university. So the Cornell IRB approved, in fact declared that there was no need for approval, because the scientists who were co-author of the paper were not involved in the data gathering. They were not involved in the collection of the data, so they were not responsible for how the data were collected. If they didn't have to make sure that the informed consent was obtained or something like that. And that's a very interesting perspective. They abandoned, they didn't want to take any responsibility about this experiment, saying that it's a Facebook affair, it's not their affair. But someone needs to be responsible for it.
Facebook business.
Yes, Facebook business, exactly. Sorry, thanks. Facebook business, exactly. However, so there are ethical issues, there are legal issues. The informed consent is obviously also a legal issue, but there are also, in my view, epistemological issues that need to be raised in order to understand what was going on in that experiment. So if we look at the details of the experiment, we realize that the positive or negative emotion that were captured, let's say, within the post that were pushed to users, were defined according to the linguistic inquiry and word count software that define generically a word as positive or negative. So there is no contextual, no nothing. And there is, for example, no understanding of the ironic meaning of a word, that it can be used as a it's a considered positive word, but in fact it's used in an ironical way. So there is nothing like that, and the posts are considered positive or negative, counting the number of positive words compared with the number of negative words. So the system interprets the post by listing these expressions, saying they are negative, they are positive. In my view, from an epistemological point of view, consider that this post can be defined positive or negative by a machine, by a software, is something rather critical. They need to be more, they need to be studied more. But of course, there was no other way having they cannot use another way, considering the quantity of data that they needed to analyze. So the machine was the only solution that they could use to analyze all this data. And again, the experiment is based on the idea that human behavior is predictable and manipulated very easily. So human behavior is stable and can be altered mechanically. There was no replication of the experiment possible, and this is something that normally need to be guaranteed within a scientific methodology. There was no control on how data were acquired, because they were acquired within Facebook, the Facebook science team. So no one could be involved in it, and in fact the two social scientists involved in the paper were not responsible for the data as guaranteed by the ethical committee. However, their reputations were used by Facebook in order to validate the results, and in fact the results were published in an important journal of social sciences, as I was saying before. Now, this is a bit of a theoretical picture. It is not possible to represent without intervening. This is something that I've cited in this slide. Evelyn Fox Keller, a feminist philosopher of science, Ian Hacking, but I could have cited everybody else, like a critical left-wing, let's say, philosopher of science. That would confirm the fact that it's not possible to represent without intervention. Representation is not possible without intervention. Now, Facebook experiment is a clear example of the fact that representation, in this case, needed intervention. In order to understand the emotional reactions of the users, they adopted a manipulation. Let's put a manipulation in a neutral sense. I don't want to say that they are manipulating the users. This is something that is outside the frame of this discussion. But the manipulation is implied in order for the experiment to take place. Otherwise, there is no experiment, because you need to count the positive reactions to the positive posts. So you need to create a list of positive posts compared to a list of negative posts and see if they have an emotional.
But do they say what is positive and what is negative?
There is this list. There is this
just
software.
I like or I don't like, or
no. There is this list of positive words that is listed.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
so,
which is listed in this software.
So they also have to decide if one word reflects a positive.
Yes, but they cannot decide themselves, not the scientists, not the people. Mm-hmm. The machine decided according to the software.
I see.
Okay, so there is a software that is like processed by the machine, and this list of posts are first of all
Are processed by software, and then
yes, processed by software. Then you say, okay, these are the positive posts. So we with this group of people, we send them more positive posts than negative posts, choosing between their friends' posts. Okay, so we want to they increase the number of positive posts coming from their friends, from a group of people to a group of people, and then they increase the negative number of the negative post number from another group of people, and the result, and then they see the reaction, and again they evaluated the reaction following the machine tools that says that people that were exposed to more positive posts, they tend to produce more positive new positive posts, right. And people that were exposed to negative posts, they produced more negative posts. So there was this emotional contagion. If I receive more bad news, I tend to be sadder. Nice. No, if I receive negative news, I tend to be sadder than if I receive positive news.
Okay, you've got 5 minutes now.
No,
so
really.
You have to go rapidly to the conclusion.
Really? No, 5 minutes, maybe 10. Okay, so we need to be to have clear in mind the fact that while you are representing, you are transforming. Now let's move to Google Fruit Trends failure.
This is your last case.
No, I don't want to discuss about this. I want to discuss about Culturomics.
You can summarize Google Flu.
Google Flu is they realized that Google Flu Trends, the prediction of the flu, the peak of the flu in US was not correctly done, because the prediction, Google prediction, were just doubled the reality. In this case, we could check the reality, because there are these small data predictions coming from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention in US that showed what's happening really. And also in Google Fruit Trends, you get all these key characteristic, that the fact that the data are stable, the fact that it is impossible to repeat experiment, the fact that it's impossible to set a measurement system, the fact that it's not clear which data are used in order to obtain the predictions, etc., etc. And now we move to Humanities Culturomics. In this case, you have this.
It's another form of using
yes,
big
another
data.
form of using big data, in which I copied the Wikipedia entry. The idea that it is possible to study the human behavior, cultural trends, by using quantitative analysis of digitized text. So one of the results of the Culturomics is the Ngram program. Ngram's program, which is a tool that was built using Google Books data, containing 4% of all the book published from the beginning of the print technology on over. But of course, we have to take into account the fact that there is a bias on English books, because of course Google Books have more English books than other language books.
Than books in other languages, so it's biased by Anglophone.
Yes, Anglophone. Probably the results in Anglophone world are better than the results in other languages because of the quantity of the data. And according to the authors of this project, Michael and Lieberman-Heden, we can use this rigorous quantitative inquiry in order to understand to obtain new results from that can be used for social sciences and humanities. And there is another use of culturomics called culturomics 2.0, in which they suggest that you can use this technique to analyze big data, not of books, but to real-time data of news. So, like, let's say newspaper, television, radio, etc. And they consider that using this data, they can make prediction on future events. Now, if we look at the distant reading cases, one of the distant reading cases, that censorship and suppression that were done during the Nazi period against people who were considered negative, we can understand that, of course, the knowledge created by close reading of the Nazi history was a necessary background in order to obtain results, in order to make the right question. So it is not possible to use this technique without a previous knowledge. That is, of course, a knowledge that comes from experts in the humanities. So we cannot deny the fact that, of course, we can use big data, but we need to use them within a frame of a clear limits, clear boundaries that are, of course, offered by traditional technique of understanding of close reading. And Culturomics 2.0 seem even worse, because they pretend they can, let's say, understand the future event, and of course, which is difficult to deny, but it's also difficult to assess. Now, last part, that's a conclusion, and epistemology and politics, research and power. Okay, I will skip this. I want just to say a few things on this idea of researching or spying, starting from a paper by Barendrecht, Buckler, and Rockwell, a very recent paper, in which they ask questions about how to keep on doing the research as a digital scientist after Snowden revelations that show that NSA and the other intelligence agencies uses the methods developed within the digital humanities in order to spy on people. Of course, the digital humanist now is losing his or her innocence in experiencing the fact that the Manhattan the fact that they have their own Manhattan Project. They know that there is no neutral technology. Obviously, technologies are always oriented once they are used, and we cannot deny it, and we have to take responsibilities for what we are doing. Even as scientists, we cannot say there is science, so we can do whatever we want, because science protects us from making bad things.
I think we have to go to the conclusions.
Yes, okay. We have to pay attention to the rhetoric of big data. First of all, computers are better problem solvers than humans. And if computers are better problem solvers, then we have to abandon the field and leave the machines do what they want without any control, because they are better than us. And data-driven science rhetoric, according to which there is no need for theory, no need for interpretation, no need for model, because data can make sense of themselves without any other layer. But this is a rhetoric, because in order to find a correlation, we need to choose the machine learning algorithm that we want to use. And if we fail at choosing the algorithm, we risk that the correlations are just random. So Just a quick word on Raghavan, who is vice president of engineering at Google. So we cannot say that he is biased against big data, but he is suggesting that we need to find methodologies for decomposing hard questions of social sciences in a series of robust analysis that are replicable and composable, and we are not yet there, so we need to work harder.
Reflect. Any proposals
Yes.
and solutions?
Well, my proposal is that we need to pay attention. We need, obviously, there is no, we cannot avoid using, processing all this data and using these new methodologies, because this is stupid. I mean, we cannot avoid to use the data, but we have to use them asking the right questions in order to understand what's going on, the rhetoric that is behind the promised land that big data offer us. So who owns the data? Who owns the machines on which data are processed? Who plans the algorithms? Are the people expert in the fields, so in this case, for example, social sciences and humanities, involved in the process of planning the algorithms, or are they outside? We need to consider how we can consider these results. Can we replicate the results? Is it possible to replicate the results? Is it possible to compare the big data results with other little data or small data experiments? Who is going to take advantage of the results? And it is possible to replicate the process on different machines with different algorithms in order for the stability of the results to be established. Otherwise, if all these questions are the answer to this question are negative, or we don't know who owns the data, or we can understand that the data are owned or processed according to a politics, a clear politics that will advantage some part against another, then we should not use the data, or should use the data with a special attention.
Thank you very much. So these are the questions that should be addressed if we want to use wisely big data in the humanities.
Yes, that's what I suggest. That's my suggestion when we want to use big data.
Thank you very much, Teresa, and
thanks
you,
to
Domenico. All our followers, and see you to the next talk, to the next, maybe next year, next Around the World conference.
And obviously thanks to the organization of the Around the World conference for letting all this be possible.